All right, cool. So what I want to show in this video is some of the techniques that we can use for taking our multi-view drawing of our phone and turning that into the beginning of our design for the case in Onshape. So I have the front view of my phone over here with some basic measurements, and I'd like to start putting that into Onshape. So one technique, and I mentioned this yesterday, one technique is to start by making kind of the overall outline body of the phone. So in order to do this, since I have a drawing on the front face of the phone here, I'm going to go to my front plane in Onshape. I'm going to make a new sketch on the front plane. And I'm going to start by just drawing a rectangle out and putting in the dimensions of my phone. So it's 2.501 by 5.213 in this particular case. I can zoom back a little and make sure that looks good. And I can click the check. So that shows sort of the overall outside boundaries of my phone. Then if I scooch over a little bit and I look at the side view of my phone, I can see on the dimension drawing that it shows that it's 0.252 inches thick. So I don't need a new sketch. I'm going to go to my extrude tool and I'm going to extrude this out that same amount. And extrude at 0.252 inches. So that gives me kind of the thickness of my phone. So if I orbit around here, I can see that looks like the basic outline of my phone. Now, the last thing that I indicated on here I need to indicate is the radius, and I can find the radius of those corners by starting where the curve begins and measuring to where the curve ends. And it looks like that measurement on my phone was 0.25 inches. So taking my phone, what I'm going to do is use my fillet tool. I'm going to grab those edges, and I'm going to grab each one of those, and I'm going to fillet those in 0.25 inches. So that looks good. I could change the radius here. If you measured a different amount, you could absolutely change that fillet. But now as I orbit around and come back to my isometric view, that looks pretty good. Now I don't have all the features on my phone. I don't have the home button, if there is one, or buttons on the side, or a charging port, or any of those kinds of things, but I got the basic overall shape and size of my phone. So what I can do now is use this as the basis for sketching my case. So I'm going to go back to my front view again here, and I'm going to make another new sketch. This time I'm going to sketch right on the front of the original one, the phone body itself. And this is a place where we're going to use a tool that we've used before, but in a slightly different way. So what I want to do is I want to design a case that fits around the phone, but it needs to have a little bit of space to fit between the case and the phone. So if we look on the side here, we look at my little case designs, you can see that the way that I've got each of these drawn is that they show the phone inside here, and then they've got the case surrounding it. But what we don't really look at is how much space is there between the edge of the phone and the inside edge of the phone case. So if we zoomed way in on that, what we're kind of talking about is, let's say that here's the top corner of my phone, and here's my case. Those two things can't be directly touching. There needs to be a tiny little bit of space between there for the phone to actually be able to sit in there. And we call that amount of space between the object and the other object the tolerance. How much space is in between there? And so we want to design that into our case, and we're going to use the Use Project tool to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the lines that define the outside edge of the phone. We're going to actually start off our new sketch for the case itself by using those lines. We're kind of reusing them. So I'm going to click Use Project, and I want to use all the outside lines here. I want to make sure that I get the line, not the corner point there. And I'm just going to go around and grab all of these. Now this is certainly not the only way you could do this in terms of designing your case, but I think these techniques might be useful. So just as an example, to show you what we have so far, I'm going to click the green check on this sketch, and I'm going to turn off part 1. What you can see here now is I've got a set of lines that were made just by projecting or using the lines from the outside edge of my phone. Okay? So if I made something outside of these, I could then turn that into my actual phone case. But I want a little bit of space. I want that little bit of tolerance between the outside edge of my phone and the inside edge of my case. So to do this, I'm going to use another tool in Onshape. I'm going to open my sketch back up. I'm going to go up to my tools, and I'm going to look for the offset tool. So what the offset tool allows you to do is to actually take a line and move it over or in a certain amount. Oops, let me try that again. Go to my offset tool there. There we go. So I've clicked on that line, and what I can define now is how much I want to offset this. So if I double click in here, I can change how much I offset it. So that would offset it by 1/2 inch. That's a pretty big amount. 1/2 inch between the phone and the case means the phone would just be rattling around in it. That's no good. I could go incredibly small, kind of the other direction, and I could set that at a much smaller number. I could set that to 0.01 inches. So there is 1/100th of an inch separation between there. But a really powerful technique in Onshape that we haven't used yet are what are called variables. What a variable allows you to do is say, this name is going to stand in for this value. So just kind of like we do in programming or math. So what I can do, if I'm not sure exactly what the amount of tolerance is that I want to use, if I double click on this, what I can do instead is type hashtag or £, and I can type in the word tolerance. You could call this variable whatever you want, but because this is going to be our tolerance, that's what I'm going to say. That allows me to create a new variable, and we can give it whatever value we want. So if I think that 0.02 inches, so 2/100ths of an inch, if I think that's going to be the right amount of space to have between my phone and my case, I could click the green check, and I could hit return, and now that tolerance works out to be 0.02 inches. So if I change my mind later, I could always go back and update that tolerance variable, and it will automatically update everything in my sketch that uses that tolerance variable. So when we talk about Onshape being a parametric CAD system, that's what we're talking about. Those parameters or variables are what allow us to define a number and then go back and change it later if something about our design changes. So it's a really, really powerful tool. So I've now basically offset one line. I want to go through and I want to offset all of the lines in here. So I'm going to do my offset tool again, and if you look for it, it might be buried under a menu. It almost looks a bit like an outline of a piano. It's got 2 double lines here. So I have to unfortunately do these one at a time. I can't offset a whole bunch of lines at once, but I want to offset this line here. And instead of offsetting it by 0.25 inches, I'm going to just type in hashtag tolerance, and it will automatically update it and offset it by that amount. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to offset this one by the amount of tolerance. And actually, in this case, it looks like it went the wrong direction. So I can also type in a negative sign there. So it's going to offset it by that tolerance, but in this case, we need to move that line up to the outside instead of to the inside. Come back to my offset tool. I'm just going to keep working my way around here, updating this by offsetting this and telling it how much I want for the tolerance. Whoops. There's another one where it looks like we have to offset it by a negative amount. So let's look at that. There it is down there. We're going to offset it by the negative tolerance there, so it goes to the outside of the scale. And now we're almost done. We've got 3 more lines that we need to offset. One down here. I'm going to offset this by our amount of tolerance. I'm going to offset this by our amount of tolerance. And I'm going to do this last one here. And what I'm doing there is just double clicking that amount to be able to type in the word tolerance there. So that looks pretty good as a starting point. If I zoom back, I'm going to see that I got those sort of double lines all the way around it. Now what I want to do is I might want to say how big the overall outer thing is. So there's a bunch of different ways I could do this. I could do another offset from here to create the outer edge of the case. So when I say the outer edge of the case, I'm talking about this outer edge like here. So we've just kind of defined where the inner line is. Now I'm going to start defining where the outer line is. But if I didn't feel like offsetting it, I could do a number of other things. I could come up here, for example, and grab a center point rectangle. I could find the midpoint of this line, find the midpoint of this line, and I could use that to help find the center of the thing. And if I wanted my case to be kind of chunky and rectangular, I could just draw a rectangle out from the center, and now I've got something that I could start extruding. I could go in here and extrude this. And this is a place where it might be useful to have my other part, my actual phone body, turned on. So in this case, it looks like I need to extrude the other direction, so that wraps around the phone. Looks like that's a little too deep. So if I go back to my dimension drawing for the phone, I can see that it was 0.252 inches thick. So maybe I want to make that thickness just a hair bigger, like 0.26. And now it looks like my case extends just a tiny bit below my phone, so my phone can sit inside the case just a little bit. So that looks pretty good there. I could click OK on my extrude. Maybe I want to go back in and fill up those corners now, and so on and so forth. I need to make a bottom so that my phone doesn't just fall through there. But that gives me a nice starting point for the outline of my case. It gives me the tolerance I need. In fact, if I go to my front view and zoom in, you can see there's that teeny tiny little air gap, so there's a place for the phone to sit. And the nice thing is, if I ever change my mind about what I want that tolerance to be, I could go in and update it. So if we were to print it, for example, and find out that that tolerance is way too small, I could go in and update that, and it would automatically increase the amount of tolerance. If I decided that I was going to add a strip of foam rubber around there, and I needed a much bigger gap, I could update that tolerance to be really big comparatively, and it would update everything that uses that variable. So it's a really, really powerful tool. So today we basically learned two new techniques. We learned offsetting, and we learned using variables to drive parts of our design. I'm going to go ahead and end the video now.